Yes, Your Honor. Permission to proceed? Drugs, greed, and incompetence kill. Today, you've seen that the defendant, Dr. Ray Schaefer, motivated by greed, incompetently used opioid drugs and killed Coach McAdoo. May it please the court, Your Honor, opposing counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. The defense will have you believe that sleeping requirements, vegetable requirements, and exercise requirements are the same requirements to save a life? Absolutely not. When you become a doctor, you take an oath to do no harm. Doctors have an obligation to constantly act in good faith, no matter what the situation is. Because at the end of the day, it's their patient, their medicine, and their responsibility. Now, Dr. Schaefer's practice began in good faith, but it quickly took a turn for the worse when her financial situation changed. The minute things started going south in the defendant's business life, she started practicing medicine in bad faith by acting more like a drug dealer than a doctor. Instead of maybe 8 or 13% of patients getting opioid prescriptions, which is what she was doing before her financial problems occurred, the defendant's rates drastically increased to 84%. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. 84%. This at a time when national rates were dropping to half that number. With that as a backdrop, the ultimate question to you, ladies and gentlemen, is did Dr. Ray Schaefer act in good faith when treating Coach McAdoo? Under the law, good faith means being faithful to your duties and obligations as defined by professional standards. Here, those standards are set by the CDC, and its guidelines define how and when a doctor should prescribe opioids. 2 of those guidelines mandate that a physician conduct urine tests and check the PDMP before prescribing opioids. And why is that? Because a 3rd guideline states that opioids and benzodiazepines should never be prescribed concurrently. Yet that is exactly what Dr. Schaefer did and had been doing for months. And why did she do that? Because she never once did a urine test on Coach and never once checked the PDMP. Had she bothered to do either, she would have seen that other doctors have been prescribing oxycodone and Xanax to Coach for months. But not just other doctors, ladies and gentlemen, but Dr. Schaefer herself. The defendant prescribed oxycodone on 3 separate occasions over the last 3 months, which means she had 3 opportunities to check the PDMP. In October, in November, and in December. Had the defendant checked even one of these 3 times, she would have seen that Coach was taking Xanax, a benzodiazepine. With that knowledge, she should have never prescribed those opioids. Dr. Schaefer did not simply act negligently. She acted in willful disregard of her duty, and her bad faith was directly responsible for Coach McAdoo's death. But the defendant wants to blame everyone else, but particularly the victim and Nurse Kelsey. The problem is that while Dr. Schaefer can try and run from her duty, she can't hide from it. Dr. Schaefer should have known Coach was an addict, and because her symptoms showed signs of possible withdrawal, she should have checked the database, but she didn't 3 times. As for Nurse Kelsey, it was Dr. Schaefer who had the duty to prescribe potentially lethal drugs, and it was Dr. Schaefer who had the ability to prescribe those dangerous drugs. My co-counsel asked you earlier, if your doctor is going to inject you with this high level of opioids, wouldn't you want your doctor to check the PDMP? Required or not, a doctor who acts in good faith always checks. Dr. Schaefer, with the power to heal and to kill, prescribed a deadly dosage of opioids. But if the doctor complied, Coach would be alive. Ladies and gentlemen, the facts demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant prescribed drugs resulting in death, and that she did so out of greed and in willful disregard of professional standards. Your verdict matters. Your verdict will hold accountable a rogue doctor who valued money over the health and lives of her patients. For that reason, we ask that you return with the only verdict consistent with the evidence, that Dr. Ray Schaefer is guilty as charged. Thank you.
Your Honor, pursuant to mock trial rules, I'm not allowed to object during a closing statement. However, if I had been permitted to object during the closing statement, I would have objected to the opposing team's statement that a doctor who acts in good faith always checks the PDMP report, as it was never testified to or stated in tonight's trial, and is therefore not permissible in closing arguments pursuant to mock trial rules 6.18.
Duly noted. At this point in the normal trial, the judge would proceed to instruct the jury on the law of the case, facts being for the jury, the law being for the judge, and they would have to listen to me. But it's a pretty intelligent looking jury, and given the hour, we're going to assume the jury knows what in the world they're supposed to go do, which will not be a verdict necessarily on the merits of the case, but on the advocacy and the wonderful advocacy that we saw here. So, Mr. Hetherington, if you would escort the jury to their deliberation board. Are you going to, when they come back, are you going to check on that? Please be seated. This is the point in the trial where you see the irony of the judge being one person in the courtroom that isn't judging these folks. That is also a blessing, because trying to distinguish between wonderful performances is a very difficult thing, and I do not envy the jury their job. They have some reasonably complicated scoring sheets, so they hopefully will come up with an appropriate decision. This is a time also for me to make a critique, but the critique sort of implies criticism, and I have none. Were I each of your coaches, yeah, we'd go back and we'd huddle, and I'd say, oh, do this better, don't do that, that kind of stuff. And I trust your coach will talk to you about those things. I tried several hundred jury trials as a prosecutor in Cumberland County across the river, and I never once sat down from examining a witness or making an opening or closing when within 2 or 3 minutes I didn't think of 3 things I should have said, meant to say, could have said better. It happens. I trust to one degree or another you've experienced that. It doesn't mean you did bad, because you didn't. You did well. Back when I'm retired from the bench now, but when I was still an active judge, I never went through one of these things. I didn't want to offer a couple of people jobs. They're that good. I see lawyers who are not that good. Trust me. Now, is anybody going in, have an inkling that they might want to go into the law? That's more than I usually see. That's 6 of you. That's good, because 1, you've got the talent. And 2, I take it you've got an interest. And that's a good thing. There are too many lawyers. There's always room for a couple good ones. You've shown that you've got that potential, and I hope some of you, anyhow, follow through with it and are able to do it. When I say I offer jobs, I keep forgetting that you got at least 7 years of education, formal education, before that would take effect. Stick with it. particularly in law school, if you've got common sense, you can get through. You really can. It is not as daunting as perhaps some of the movies and novels make it. I have every confidence in you. I know you have to award people on the other team, advocate and witness. Are you want to talk? Are you ready?
We have a few moments of deliberation.
You certainly may. The folks in the back, I know many of you are related. You should be busting your buttons. Pride at how good these folks are. For the coaches, thank you for your time.
No, thank you, Judge.
The thing I did was come here instead of go home and watch.
Hey, Judge, I don't know if you know this or not, but you're like a legend in mock trial. Every year I show videos to the kids, you know, from previous state competitions, and you are in some of those. So you're
that
very
good?
well known with some of our kids.
Is that good? I mean,
That's
they're
good.
legends,
You did a
they're
great
bad
job.
legends, you know?
Hey, thanks for coming and
No,
volunteering your time.
no, this is my pleasure. Some of the young lawyers and the jurors, they deserve your thanks too, because they're giving of their time for this process, which is a pretty good thing. We hear an awful lot about bad kids. I use the term kids with great affection. It's so reassuring to see that there are folks who will lead our community, our state, our country in the future that have what it takes and such to do it. So, I don't know where you're from, I don't care where you're from. I might learn later, but it doesn't matter because I can't vote anyhow. So, we'll let the prosecution go first.
Thank you, Your Honor. The prosecution would like to present the Best Witness Award to Carmi Wilmot. And the prosecution would like to present the Best Advocate Award to Ivy Snyder.
All right, the defense would like to present our Best Advocate Award to Alexis Forsythe.
We will be presenting our Best Witness Award to Nawaz Sharif.
Now, if Tavester hadn't dissed the defendant, you get a real shot at that last one. Of course, so you don't like the defendant, so I guess that shot down. Everybody did a fine job. Any questions I can answer for the folks in the back or the team? Okay. You look like you got one.
Yeah, in regards to some of your hearsay rulings
Yeah.
with the witness's own prior statement that was made out of court, can you just explain some of those?
Yeah, this is a competition that, in a real trial, I may not have made the same ruling. The goal here is to get your objection and the response in front of the jury. So it's your argument that counts, not my ruling. And I always tend to rule in favor of letting the evidence come in because, you know, you're going to argue to the jury and you need evidence on both sides. Things coming in, I don't want to shortcut you in that sense. So my rulings are in favor of letting it in more often than not, but it's the give and take, which is why I point, were this a real trial and I was a curmudgeon judge, which I'm not, but were I, it would be, no, boom, move on. Because judges never want to try this case. They want to try the next case because they have too many cases. They want to keep it moving. So I think the experience in real life would be less discussion between the two of you and immediate rulings that might be different than they were tonight because of the nature of the competition. The objections, other than the ones that have to do with the rules of competition, with which I am not familiar, more than passing familiarity, were well taken. I really think they were. And just because you lose a ruling doesn't mean it was an improper ruling. There are a lot of reasons to object. You can't object, and I sensed that once or twice tonight that they were to interrupt the flow of the witness, which is technically not right, but practically done all the time. And I'm glad they have a rule that you can't interrupt the closings. There used to be a defense attorney over in Cumberland County who would always interrupt your opening and your closing. He just did it every time because he felt it was important to, if you got on a roll, to stop you. And I went to the judge one time and said, now when Mr. So-and-so objects to my closing, I'm just going to stand there in mid-sentence, Judge, if that's all right with you, because you know he's going to do it. But then he did it. So you make a point with the jury by standing there and doing it. I saw a defense attorney, in fact, it was in Dauphin County. There was a prosecutor, the defendant threw a glass of water on him in the middle of his closing. He stood there, they calmed the defendant down, he didn't move, they went right on with his closing. You know, that takes something to be able to do that. But objecting in this format probably isn't going to do you much good in any event. What's your objection? I have no idea what that ruling might have been in real life. Okay, that's all I have until the jury comes back. Once the jury comes back, they'll give Mr. Hetherington their verdict. He's going to recheck the math, and he will announce the winning team. But again, let me say this, the nationals for this competition, the national was held in Pittsburgh a number of years ago. And I went out there and presided once or twice, I was a juror once or twice. And Pennsylvania's teams are so much better than so many of the other teams. I don't know. There are states that really put a lot of resources into this. I mean, they start recruiting kids in 6th grade for these competitions. And yeah, they do well, and Pennsylvania doesn't always come out on top in the nationals. But they always do well, and they always acquit themselves very well, because some of the other people in the competition just are not up. They would never make our state, they'd never make this stage, much less state finals. I would be proud of all that. Well, you people going to law school, how many have parents that are lawyers? None? You be the first ones? I'm glad my wife isn't here. She'd try to talk you out of it. She was a long-time prosecutor and been a defense attorney for a dozen years now. I had 2 sentences today, so she is going to be very tired. I'm going to hear all about it when I get home. But when people ask her, she always, don't listen to her. Don't listen to her. It can be very rewarding. If you like the courtroom, prosecution and defense is the way to get in the courtroom. And I know that when I was in law school, I guess it was the middle of my 2nd year, I really had no real direction where I was going to go once I got out of school. I might just be in general practice locally here. And somebody said there was a clerkship available in the DA's office. And I applied for it and I got it. It was like a light bulb went off for me that I could actually get in the courtroom and how neat that would be. And don't know if I had the talent for it, but I certainly had the will to do it, and found a home there. Didn't win them all, didn't win a lot of cases I should have won. But I always enjoyed it, and I always think that you can do a lot of good as prosecution, as defense for folks. And wherever your legal career might take you, you can do that. I hope that you find something that, one, you enjoy, whatever field. One of my best friends in law school became a tax attorney. I would rather have eye surgery every day than tax. It just is not my cup of tea, but thank goodness there are people who do. So wherever it takes you, find something you enjoy, and I really think that it is the satisfaction you get out of helping people that will give you the greatest satisfaction. Are they milling about out there?
I don't know, I just heard something.
Okay. I know, this is, the worst time for a trial lawyer is when you know the jury has a verdict, and you gotta wait for them to come back and announce it. It's a unique feeling. Only those who have been at the table really understand that. And whatever their decision is, this is tough times. My father was a general practitioner across the river. And when he started in the early 50s, lawyers did pretty much hang out their shingle and then do whatever comes in the door. So you got a broad exposure to the law. Nowadays, it's much more specialized. You're more likely to know people who do the same kind of law you do as you are to know somebody whose office is down the street. It's a change. But I worked with him for a couple of years in his practice. And he had a fellow named Earl Weary. Earl at the time was an 80-year-old bachelor, as was his brother. And he came in to have his income taxes done. So my dad gives Earl to me. This would have been 32 years after Pop started. He says, got the taxes. So I go over his income with him, and I prepare his federal tax, his federal estimate, his state tax, his state estimate, his local tax, his local estimate, and a property tax rebate form. When we're all done, he signs them all, give him copies, tell him where to sign it, actually put stamps on his envelopes for him. He says, okay, what do I owe you? And my dad's bottom line was, because he didn't pay any attention to what he had charged him before, it's the same as last year. And Earl says, nope, that's too much paper, I'm going to double it, and he gave me $10. Now, if he'd have given me $1,000, $1,000 would be gone, and I'd be the same place I am. But I got Earl Weary up here as somebody that we helped. We didn't have a lot of money, and that's the kind of thing that gives you the satisfaction in the practice of law, and probably in the other professions that you other folks might find yourselves in. Remember that as you go forward. You're trying to interpret what they're talking about. You can't.
We're good whisperers.